Thank you for joining Rewire News Group today as we look to assess President Biden's first 100 days, which, of course, is an important milestone in any presidency. And lots of folks are going to be looking at how he's been delivering against his promises. But I really want us to focus on his promises around our issues, reproductive and sexual health, rights, and justice, which are issues that for too long have been deprioritized, have not been front of mind, front and center. And I think that this is the year where we're starting to feel like maybe that's changing. So with that,
I
and
hope.
maybe.
Maybe.
So with that in mind, I want to go back to January 20th, which was the day that President Biden was inaugurated. And just from an emotional perspective, thinking about, the administration before and that day when we saw President Biden and Vice President Harris up there, what were you feeling? What did the scene conjure up for you from an emotional perspective?
Yeah. I mean, that moment that day, obviously, it felt like for a lot of people, this huge sigh of relief of like, okay, that piece of Trump is over, right? When he was elected, as most people know, it is very difficult to get a sitting president out. They often are reelected. So I have always been operating as if he would do 8 years. And I wasn't actually sure he was going to leave. So seeing them being inaugurated, it was this moment of, wow, okay, we did it. We got rid of him. And there's still a lot of work that we have to do. And so I felt this immense amount of pride, to see Vice President Kamala Harris, up there and making history and this beauty of representation as a biracial Black woman myself. And I'm watching the inauguration with my two biracial Indian nieces.
Mhm.
There was just a lot of joy and pride in our home, and it just was like such a wonderful day. And there was a lot of, oh man, we got a lot of work to do. um, and I think that day was a lot of emotions and a mix of feelings for me, in that I felt really, really excited. I also felt very nervous that something additional was going to happen, like the insurrection. I remembered feeling that when my cousin who I was with, we also saw Barack Obama be inaugurated both in 2008 and 2012. And just this kind of feeling of like, oh my gosh, is something bad going to happen? So that nervousness, I was feeling that a lot. And then, of course, I had the excitement, and that was kind of smashed a little bit during the first press conference. And it brought me a bit back down to reality of how much work we still have to do with this administration, even though they consider themselves to be pro-choice. But I think they actually could do a bit more to prove that to all of us. And it's complicated. So it was a
Yeah.
swirl of a lot of really complicated emotions that
Yeah.
day.
And we're going to get to that first press conference in a minute. But
I
first,
bet.
I was really struck to hear you say that you had been preparing for 8 years of Trump. First of all, how do you even
Oh
prepare
yeah,
for
girl.
like how do you even wrap your brain around that reality? What was that preparation like?
Well, there were a couple of things. I was burning out a bit in 2016 because, we all worked so hard. There was the Supreme Court case, and then there was the election. And to just feel this heartbreak of being excited that we had won the case, and that felt like it was foreshadowing what was going to happen in the election. And in fact, it was the complete opposite, was just heartbreaking. And I remember thinking, oh man, if he is president for 8 years, he's going to take my entire 30s, and I will not let this white supremacist take my 30s from me. So I started thinking about, like, what is it that I wanted to do? How did I want to live during this time? And that was everything from traveling, spending a lot more time with family, those types of things. But it also really shifted the way that I did work. And I decided that I really wanted to work exclusively with and on behalf of people who have abortions. And I wanted to be out loud, out front, just really changing the game, changing the conversation. And although I assumed and was planning for and operating as if he was going to be in office for 8 years, I still also operated as if the reality was that a candidate who promised to repeal the Hyde Amendment and had stopped saying things like safe, legal, and rare, and was actually talking about her support for abortion access, had the most votes across this country. And so it reminded me that abortion is not so much a divisive issue in this country, it's a gerrymandered one. And so I did this weird thing where I both operated as if Trump was going to be like here for 8 years, but also operated as if Hillary won, and that's actually where the country is emotionally and
Right. You had
culturally.
facts on your side. Yeah.
Right. It was complicated, right? Because it's such a push and pull because those are two very different things. But it felt really important to me to not kind of be dragged down with Trump's bullshit, for lack of a better word. Um,
Oh,
but actually to be moving forward because our country is moving forward, our culture is moving forward. The way in which abortion is talked about on TV and all of these things is moving forward, even if the political landscape and the policies are not. And culture takes over and culture is always ahead of where the policies are. So
mm.
it felt really important to me to make sure that in this really frustrating, scary, trying moment, that people who have abortions feel loved, supported, and seen throughout all of
All right, so let's get into this
it.
disconnect between the culture and policy, starting at the very top, starting with President Biden himself. You referenced that first press conference. What was so disappointing to you about
um,
it?
everything. Literally every single second of it. I mean, You know, it, it's not even a thing of just that first press conference. It's actually been now so far through this first 100 days that um, President Biden on a lot of issues has been very clear about how he feels or where his values are on certain things, right? I thought it was really beautiful that Jen Psaki was stood up there at the press conference and said, trans rights are human rights. This is what this administration ran on during the campaign. Like, we will make sure trans people have access to health care, all of those things. They said it so very clearly. Have been saying the same thing around supporting the workers who are trying to unionize Amazon in Alabama. Said, we support unions. We believe it's important to a thriving middle class. Like, they explain all of those things. And yet, when they're asked about abortion, they say, well, the president goes to church and he's a very devout Catholic. Next question. And they don't even bother to say, actually, what this is what we ran on. They don't bother to say we believe that, I don't know, Roe v. Wade is the law of the land. They usually say that one, and that didn't even come out. So it was this disappointment and frustration, and then the continuation of refusing to say the word abortion, refusing to use the word abortion in the Roe v. Wade statement on the anniversary. All of those things are these signals to all of us who have abortions that actually they don't necessarily want to go out and make sure that we have access to the healthcare that we need, that they're not willing to go out on a limb and defend us, and that we're a last priority when it comes to this administration. And that feels very frustrating considering that obviously the last administration was so awful, openly talking about people who have abortions should be punished and treated poorly and, convinced otherwise and told misinformation, all of those things, right? To then have put faith in a party or in a new administration and hope that things will change, and they pretend like you don't exist and add to the stigma. And I feel like it's almost as if, you know how Biden made the joke about wanting needing to like disinfect the White House and all of
Yes.
that after. I feel like they didn't disinfect it enough because the air of abortion stigma is still wafting throughout that place, and they are breathing it deep. And I'm very concerned, and I want to see them step up. If you're pro-choice, be about it. If you say that you believe Roe is the law of the land, then be about it and make sure everybody can get access to abortion care. And there are so many simple things that his administration could do and has not yet done. And,
Starting with saying the word
I
abortion.
starting with saying the word abortion. I guess the piece I wrote for you all recently came out, and I guess what I said in there was, I don't know how you can say you're a champion of an issue if you won't even say the word for that issue. Could you imagine if he had an entire statement about the importance of the right to vote, but never said vote? If he said, it's really important that everybody has the right to choose their own elected officials. If they had the right to choose who voiced their opinion in Washington, D.C., if they had the right to go to a place and drop off a piece of paper that says who they prefer for their opinions.
So you're
People that
tired of the
do
euphemisms. You're
just
tired of
say the
the.
word, the right to vote. It's just that simple. And I think it sends a signal that it's a dirty word. And last thing I'll say is I think it's frustrating for me and other people who have abortions, to see that this signal is actually already being somewhat widely accepted, because we definitely saw some pushback where people were saying, well, the Roe v. Wade decision wasn't just about abortion. So why did he need to say the word abortion? Which history
Was
and
kind of news
facts
to you.
show that that's not true. It was 100% about abortion. Um, but it's that people are already becoming okay with accepting less.
Hmm. Hmm.
And that,
And why is it not okay?
well,
Why couldn't he just go all 4 years using pro choice framing and not say abortion? Why is that not
I
okay?
mean, because how do you advocate for something if you can't even say what it is, right? How can we trust that you have our best interests at heart if you're not even willing to stand with us and talk about it openly? I mean, how hard is it to stand up at that podium and say, President Biden ran on a pro-choice platform. Obviously, everyone in this country loves someone who's had an abortion, and this administration believes that everyone should have access to their constitutional rights and access to healthcare. And abortion is part of healthcare. So our administration is looking at all sorts of ways to figure out how we can make sure abortion is more accessible. We'll have more on that for you soon.
Have you ever heard a
Look at
president
that.
say that? Have you ever heard a president say that, though?
On other issues, absolutely. On other issues, absolutely. And I
Mm.
think that's what's frustrating me, because there have been times that we have heard President Biden and his press secretary and his press team say, obviously the president believes this, this, and this. We'll have more for you on that soon, and they move on, right? They don't outright dismiss it. And so to me, that's the behavior that's signaling something that's feeling very challenging. I mean,
So, how do we get
simple things.
Biden, who's, going to be 80 soon, clearly a different
Yeah.
generation.
Yeah.
But how do you get someone of that generation um, to catch up with the culture? It's a big shift, it seems. I mean, it seems like it's a big
Yeah.
ask. It doesn't seem like it should be a big ask, but it's clearly a big ask because he hasn't done it. So, what do you
Yeah.
think is going to draw? What do you think is instrumental in pushing him in that direction?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's all up to public pressure, right? I think it's up to, whenever we want to see a behavior change
Mm.
among our loved ones or our friends, we actually have to have some hard accountability with them and say, hey, because I love you and because I care about you and you're hurting this other person, I actually want to see you do better. So I need you to do this, right? And
Mm.
he has shifted in his in the way he feels about abortion. Um, he was quite anti-abortion
Yeah. Yeah.
early in his career,
Yeah.
right?
He's been on a
He
journey, as many people are.
he's been on a very long journey, and I can appreciate that. And what's really challenging is that he has been in office as long as abortion has been legal. And because so many of us are waiting for him to come on that journey to the side that means that we have our basic human rights, that means that so many people along the way haven't had access to what they need while they're patiently waiting for him to learn. And that's really frustrating. I think, he has made a lot of decisions that have impacted a lot of people's lives, like supporting the Stupak Amendment, and making sure that the Affordable Care Act doesn't cover abortion care. He's had that impact for 10 years. So I can say, yes, we can work with him to bring him along the way. Um, but at some point, we're tired of waiting. There's a interview that Tupac did a long, long time ago where he talks about we're tired of asking because we've been knocking at the door saying we're out here, we're hungry, and y'all have everything you need. And at what point are we supposed to continue sitting here knocking?
Yeah.
And at this point, all of us who've had abortions, we're tired of knocking. And so now we are banging on the door and we are saying, look, you have had over 40 years to
Yeah.
figure this
Almost
out and
50.
to read all of the books, right?
Hmm.
Get it together.
Yeah.
And no matter how you personally feel about abortion, President Biden, that's not the point. The point is that you are a duly elected public official and you are supposed to be holding up all of the laws, making sure people have access to the things that they need and get right. And you need to actually sign the executive orders, making sure that people don't have to leave their homes to go pick up abortion pills that they can easily
Yeah.
receive at home. You need to repeal the Hyde Amendment. Just do it. You know that it's wrong. Stop dilly dallying around it and actually show up for all of us who had abortions in the ways that we've shown up for you.
Is there anything he has done so far that you thought, okay, this is a good step? It's not exactly where I want to be, but okay, I'm gonna give you credit for that. You're like, no.
It's
Nothing good.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, he did what he was supposed to do that every pro-choice president has done, which is, repeal the global gag rule and, you know, expand Title 10 and all of that. And that's great. But also, the reality is that most presidents do that on day one, and he did not. And so again, I'm having a hard time.
Okay.
You know what? I'm thankful that we're going to get our COVID vaccines. That I'm excited about that. But on abortion, I- you know, I would love to give him credit, but I'm sorry, you don't get credit for just like a participation of just like I'm here and I'm pro-choice. You actually have to be about it. You can't be pro-choice in name only. You know? You can't just say I declare that I'm pro-choice and then do nothing to actually make sure people have access. And I want to be clear, obviously it's really important what he's done around, Title 10 and the global gag rule and all of that. That is going to make a huge difference in people's lives. And that's not something that he did that no other Democratic or pro-choice president has done in the past.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's doing the bare minimum. And I think it's
Mm.
very frustrating. I said in an interview recently, he had the campaign slogan, Build Back Better. And it feels like it's Build Back Better for everybody else except abortion, where we get Build Back the bare minimum. And I would love to give him credit. I really would. And I,
Okay.
I will, I will, I will hold out
You're holding out
for
hope. I
something.
can see it.
Yeah.
I can see it.
I honestly, if he could say the word abortion within the first 100 days, I'd consider that a win.
He's got 2 more weeks. So
Yeah, let's do it.
um, let's switch for a minute to what's happening in the States, because, of course, this has been the most active state legislative session we have seen in terms of, bills introduced and enacted restricting access to abortion
Yeah.
care. Um, is there something you'd like to see the Biden Harris administration stepping in to address here? Is there a role you see them playing? Because again, even if you were to come out and say Roe is the law of the land, it's the law of the land in name only in many places. So it's, to your point, so even that is not enough because it's all about getting folks access to care. And that is, I think the Guttmacher Institute found that 6 out of 10 women of reproductive age faced extreme barriers to care. I mean,
Yeah.
6 out of 10,
Yeah.
um, so talk to me about what's happening in the States and where you would like to see this administration step in.
I mean, honestly, I'd love for them to say anything to acknowledge what's happening in the States. Um, Obviously, they don't shy away from talking about things that are happening in state legislation. They've talked about a lot of these bills that are trying to ban trans athletes from participating in games and play, which are atrocious and wrong, and also a reproductive justice issue. So they've said something about that, and I think that's huge. And we know that the right to vote is being decimated in so many states, and that is connected to being able to have reproductive freedoms. So that's wonderful as well. So they have stepped in and said things about what's going on in the states. It would be wonderful if they would even remotely mention the fact that hundreds of bills are being proposed to outright ban abortion. Texas is again trying to ban abortion at 6 weeks. I didn't know I was pregnant at 6 weeks. Most people don't. And it would be great for them to talk about that, for them to say this is a clear um, issue that is in violation of the Constitution, that is, against human rights, as the WHO says human rights, but also, of course, our Constitution, Roe v. Wade, and all of that. I would love to see them say anything. Again, we have not heard them say anything. And if I had my way, I would love for them to actually speak up about the ways in which um, states tried to use the coronavirus pandemic to shut down clinics and say that that was wrong, right? And that is why they are instructing the Food and Drug Administration to look at the REMS, which are the rules that say that medication abortion, particularly the first pill that you take, mifepristone, must be dispensed in a clinic. Um, Obviously, a judge ruled that it did not. It could be subsided um, during the pandemic, because that's what a lot of other countries around the world are doing. The Trump administration took that all the way to the Supreme Court, and they won. So unfortunately, the states that were allowed to mail those pills had to stop. Um, it would be great to see the president sign that executive order, which obviously wouldn't impact all of the states, because some states do have laws that say the pills have to be dispensed in a certain way. Um, but it would make a difference in several states. It would be great for him to pull out a pen and sign his name real quick. I don't think it would take more than a couple of minutes. He doesn't even have to do it on camera. Honestly, I don't even need to see it documented. I just need, if he could just scribble it on a piece of paper on his way walking somewhere else. Um, I'd love to see that. And that's a way that he could actually make a difference in the states.
Mm,
So, you know, whenever
yeah.
you're ready, Joe, you let me know.
You are clearly tired of knocking and banging on the door.
Open the
but
door,
as we all
Joe.
but as we all know, there are a lot of expectations on this president and on this
Mhm.
administration. There is a lot
Absolutely.
of damage that needs to be undone, and a lot of laws that need to be rolled back. And there are a lot of folks, advocating for a seat at the table to get their issues front of mind for this administration. Um, do you have a sense of how, or let me ask you, how far do you think Biden can and should be pushed on reproductive justice issues? Is it, there are some people who will say you're going to
How
have to
how
wait a little
far
longer.
how far is the spectrum?
You're like, I'm shoving him out the
Yeah.
door.
Yeah.
You're going to push and push and push. And there's no,
Yeah.
this is not the time to hold back.
No, I mean, absolutely not. I think a lot of the anti-abortion restrictions that we've seen enacted came after states gerrymandered and took over the state houses, right, and did all of this redistricting to make sure that people, particularly people of color, marginalized folks, poor folks, older folks, that couldn't vote, right? And so, of course, then we got all of these restrictions because the anti-abortion movement is based and rooted in white supremacy. So the saying that I'm pro-life is this signal to say I'm also anti-immigration, I'm also racist. And so they know that it's going to be this way of disenfranchising voters on all of these other things, right? So when all of that happened in 2010, we of course saw all of the waves of abortion restrictions happen over this past decade. And we've seen the number of clinics just like drop dramatically. It's lower than it's ever been in maybe not history, but since the legalization of abortion, it's wild like how few abortion clinics there are. Um, and I feel like yes, if we are going to build back better, that also means that we need to build back every single abortion clinic that was regulated out of existence. We need to build back the safety net of abortion access that we at one point had for most people. It wasn't perfect. But also, let's build back better and let's have a budget that shares our priorities and says that, you know what? I believe that everyone should have access to the right to an abortion, and therefore, I am not going to submit a budget that includes the Hyde Amendment, right? As president, I'm going to show where my values are. I will send Congress a clean budget that ensures that every single person in this country is able to access an abortion. And if they cannot afford it, one will be provided to them by the state. And that is okay, right? I would love to see him say that. Again, we'll see. I'm going to hold out hope still. I'm going to pretend to be an optimist, but I think there are just so many ways that he could do that, and he can show where his pro-choice credentials are, um, particularly with his budget, because a budget is actually just a map or a document of our nation's priorities. And every time that we cut SNAP benefits or WIC, or how WIC doesn't cover diapers or any of those other things, we're actually showing that we aren't the pro-life nation that we say that we are. We aren't this nation that makes sure everybody has what they need. We're not, the society that cares for the huddled masses and all of that, because we actually allow children to starve in this country. We allow people to not know whether or not they can afford diapers. We don't force people to get paid a living wage. Like, we don't do any of these things to make sure that families in this country can thrive. So I look forward to seeing his budget. I won't hold my breath on the abortion piece, but if he wants to say he's pro-choice in other ways, I guess he can prove it. Obviously, I really, really, really want him to support abortion access and stay true to everything he promised us on the campaign trail, which is that he does not support the Hyde Amendment anymore. Quote, as he says, as if healthcare is a human right, as I believe, then abortion access should be accessible, right? I want to see that. And I want to see it go beyond and actually really supporting, families that are living in poverty and trying to figure out how they're going to afford food for their kiddos and diapers and all of those things.
Yeah, yeah. You touched on the inextricable link between white supremacy and the anti-abortion movement, as we ourselves have reported many of the same players in both spaces, a long, closely connected history. between those groups. They are one and the same group in many
Yeah.
instances. And of course, we've also recently seen an uptick in violence at abortion clinics these last couple of months. Can you talk a little bit about, again, what you'd like to see the president, what you think the president could do to keep doctors and patients safe at these clinics, and how concerned are you about the growing violence that we've been experiencing?
Yeah, I think white supremacists, like people think that kind of think that because anti-abortion folks are like, we want to save black babies, therefore they're not white supremacists. Honestly, they're just white supremacists whose side job is protesting abortion. That's it, right? They are pure and simple white supremacists. And I think that every single time that people kind of separate these things, they are proving that they're not understanding how much white supremacy is about controlling of people's bodies, controlling of how people live their lives, and that it is all about a like white people's desire to control how we all behave, think, live, exist in this world. And that is why you will see that all of the white supremacists are also like anti-trans and they're like anti-immigrant, all of these things, right? And the violence that they are perpetrating around this country, um, it's been everywhere. Obviously, like abortion clinics, there's kind of an ebb and flow and uptick, but like for some clinics, it's never leaves. Um, what I would love to see is that what is the president doing when he's talking to his Department of Justice and they're actually looking at white supremacist extremism? Are they asking them to only look at the Proud Boys and, how they're, gathering in the parks and attacking people? Or are they actually looking at the connections that they are having to folks who have been shooting at clinics, bombs clinics, all of those things? I think what's also felt a bit of a challenge for me personally is that and me and a lot of people in repro, we saw the connections very early on. Um, I had been harassed by some of the leaders in the Proud Boys years ago. They harassed me because of my work with abortion. And so we saw this connection. And I think I felt very challenged because there were people, even in our own movement, who were like, oh, well, harassment is just part of this work. You'll just have to get over it. But not necessarily understanding the deep viciousness of it, the deep racism that's part of it, and how much it's actually this festering ground for the explosion that happens later, which is what we're kind of seeing now. Um, and we have a chance to rectify that. I want to see this president actually connect all of the levels of violence in this country and rectify the ways in which the United States also perpetrates that harm on other countries. We can't sit here and say, well, I can't believe the Proud Boys are doing this, or I can't believe these white supremacist militias are doing this. Well, where did some of them get trained? The US military. And so I think it's really, really important that we cannot separate any of those things and that we actually look at how our nation, as an imperialist empire, is controlling what happens all around the world and people's ability to live freely. And how that's connected to white supremacy. And then, of course, like repro, because of the way that we have policies that say, no, you cannot use this money to cover abortion care globally, right? The Helms Amendment. And so I think it's all connected. Um, I think I might be asking too much of him to think
Well,
about all of those things.
these are deep systemic and, in many
They
cases,
are.
intractable problems. But
But I think what's hard is that you can't I can't quite ask him to do something about clinic, like white supremacist clinic violence, and not also ask him to do something about the United States as like white supremacist imperialism and the complications of that, right? And because they're all inextricably linked. And I think if you don't get one, you're never going to get the other.
Right.
And I think our nation is slowly getting there, right? We're having all the conversations. Our movement is having those conversations, and I'm excited to see where we go. And I really hope that, he reads all the right books and thinks about this
You'll
and
have to
makes a
send him a
difference.
care package
I
of
hope
reading.
so. Yeah.
All right. So, looking at his 100 days through the lens of our issues, I have a feeling where this is going to go. But if you had to give him a grade so far in the first 100 days, well, and it's been really fascinating because I've been interviewing a bunch of different folks, and the grades have been all over the place. So it's really interesting.
Okay.
Would you give him a passing grade, or is he going straight to F?
I'm not going to give him an F because he has
Okay.
done some things.
Okay.
Um, I feel like I'm gonna be nice and maybe say a C minus, like
Okay.
D, like C minus. Let's go with the C minus. I'm like, I want to say
Great.
D, but I'll be nice and say a C minus because here's the thing: a C is average, and he's done most of the things that the other presidents have done, but actually not all of them. So that's why he's like a C minus.
I
But
like the rationale. I like the
you
rationale. All right.
know,
And if he was going to do any extra credit, if he was going to try to get that up to at least a C, if not higher, what would you need to see from him in the next 100 days?
yeah,
What
Joe,
what are like the three
pick
things
up
that you
that
would grade him
pen.
up?
Yeah, Joe, pick up that pen, sign that executive order. We don't need the REMS for mifepristone are outdated. So make sure medication abortion is accessible. Um, say the word abortion, real simple. Say it. And then the third one is send us a clean budget. Yeah. Let's
Mm,
do a budget without the Hyde Amendment. We don't need it anymore. We are dealing with racism in this country, and the Hyde Amendment is extremely racist policy. So send us a clean budget. Those are those three things, and they're
okay.
three things you actually sort of already promised. So just do what you
So you
promised.
can do
No,
it. I love
no
that you
extra
believe in him.
credit. Honestly, like he doesn't actually need to do extra credit at this point
Yeah.
for me. I just want him to do the homework he said he was going to do.
Yeah.
That's all.
Yeah.
Start
Okay.
there.
And because I appreciate your hope and your optimism as you look forward, looking ahead to 2 years, 2 years from now, the midterm elections, which everyone is already talking about, that's the true timetable. That's the window that the president most likely has to actually be bold and make changes. Where do you hope we are on our issues 2 years from now entering the midterm elections?
Yeah, in 2 years, I cannot wait to see all of the candidates and all the politicians saying, you know what? The Each Woman Act is the law of the land, and that's what it
Mm,
is. I can't wait to see them say, the Women's Health Protection Act is the law of the land, and so that's the way it is. And I can't wait to see them all on the campaign trail saying, everyone loves someone who's had an abortion, and that is why, and I love someone who's had an abortion, and that is why I am a pro-choice candidate, and that is why I'm going to continue expanding access to abortion care to every single person, regardless of their immigration status, their ability, their race, class, gender identity, all of those things across this country. That's what I want to see, and we'll get there. I'm optimistic.
I don't know, Renee. After this interview, I think might need to go work for for a political party or a politician and craft that messaging for them.
Like here, just use it.
There you go. Well, thank you so much for your time. Those were all the questions
Thanks for
I
having me.
had. I do always like to ask if there's anything that you wanted to make sure to get across or to say that I didn't give you a chance to speak to. Happy to have you
Yeah.
offer up some final thoughts.
I think the only thing I would add is that as we are going through this process and we're pushing Biden to be the best pro-choice president he could possibly be, if you yourself are feeling a little challenged by what we're pushing him on, by asking him to use the word abortion or to stand in support of, people who have abortions, later abortion, stand against the Hyde Amendment, all of those things. If you're feeling uncomfortable about that, sit with that feeling and ask yourself why you're feeling a bit defensive. Think about what is your own possibly internalized stigma. Learn a bit more about the issue, and then come join us, because we need more people knocking on the door. Because it is hard, and I think that we all are socialized in a certain way to not support these issues or to feel uncomfortable with change. And change is good, and I think it's really important that we all sit with it and then come organize with us.